Hello and welcome to another brand new episode of What the FinTech, the podcast from the team behind FinTech Futures and the Banking Technology magazine. My name is Cameron Emanuel-Burns, a reporter at FinTech Futures, and for this episode I'm delighted to say we are joined by Adam Ennamli, the Chief Risk Officer at General Bank of Canada. And today we're going to be discussing the significant risks facing Canadian financial institutions and his processes as one of our Banking Tech Award judges. Anyway, first of all, how are you, Adam, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cameron, for having me. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing well. As I was saying just before, it's the first day of summer. It really feels like it's absolutely glorious here in sunny Kent. And I'm hearing it's not so delightful where you are in Canada.
Yeah, it's raining today. It doesn't rain often in summer, but we'll take it because we have a few forest fires and we need to calm them down.
Well, hopefully they subside. But I guess let's get into the show. And first off, could you walk us through your career journey and what led you to become the Chief Risk Officer at General Bank of Canada?
For sure. So what I can say as a disclaimer on my career is that it's a series of very interesting events that led to being in risk. So like most of risk professionals, I ended up in risk by coincidence, but it's a happy coincidence. I would start by saying that I'll start with my business degree. I wanted to keep the maximum of doors open. And that was a really good idea because I learned so much about a lot of different topics in university for my business degree and then my MBA. And that allowed me to really jump into the first challenge that presented to me, which was to work with a transportation agency in Montreal, my hometown, where I basically worked on deploying business technology. So there was an ERP, there was a lot of transportation softwares. We started by building the first centralized database for rolling stock maintenance. So it was a lot of really good technology challenges that helped me build a doer side, but also understand risk from the onset of my career. I also worked very closely with the chief operating officer, so that helps me develop a strategic side, understand how board dynamics work very early in my career. And from there, I was able to move into multiple companies in Canada and globally as well, in multiple capacities in technology. At some point, I changed to governance and strategy, which helped me build a systemic view of all the projects. So there is a moment where you realize that the project where you were spending 40 hours a week is actually just one line in a big Excel spreadsheet. And that's a big realization. It's very humbling because you see that you coexist with a lot of different priorities. And that was really interesting. After that, I was exposed to global events at Morgan Stanley. That was a really interesting career stump because there was Brexit that happened, a lot of different events that stemmed from it. And I saw how an institution that has a huge footprint can manage a risk that materialized, if you will. And then from there, moved into compliance, cybersecurity. So I was able to use my technology side, but also learn about how we interpret laws, regulations, not only at the US and Canada level, but also globally, and how you basically manage those different priorities together to have some harmony and cohesion within your own tech stack. And at some point, I was able to land my first C-level opportunity, which is here at General Bank of Canada. I got the call that everybody waits at some point to be proposed with a C-level opportunity in a Schedule 1 bank in Canada, where you can actually combine everything that you learned into one. And what's great about this, and this is what I like the most about this job, is that you're part of all conversations. Before, I used to be part of only technology conversations, be called only for compliance matters. Now, as a chief risk officer, I'm exposed to merger and acquisition conversations. I'm exposed to expansion strategies. I'm exposed to protection, cybersecurity. So it's really a good convergence, if you will, and I'm really enjoying it.
No, awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. And so could you give us a little bit more information around your role? I know you gave us a bit there, but what you've also implemented during your time at the General Bank of Canada.
For sure. So when I started, I was given a mandate to take the risk function to the next level and basically support the transformation of the bank. So the bank is at a very interesting strategic crossroads. They want to grow even further, diversify, and be able to lead the open banking charge in Canada. I know the UK, for example, is more advanced in terms of open banking, but we really want to fill that gap. And GBC wants to position itself in that matter. So as a chief risk officer, what I did first was to really identify any inefficiencies. We had really strong foundations, like my predecessor had built a really, really good base. And I just looked at what was working, kept it. What wasn't working, we really were kind of ruthless in terms of eliminating inefficiencies in terms of process and technologies. We were able to score 60% inefficiency per minute gain in the first year. So essentially, those are OPEX gains that we keep. We unified risk and compliance. So now it's the same department. So again, much better communication, much better harmony in terms of the message that comes out of the department. We also built the first bank level cybersecurity function. So now we have director head of security that reports into the function. We also worked in modernizing the fraud and AML program. And we introduced AI as a use case in the low-hanging fruit, basically use cases, meaning that, for example, to write policies, now we use generative AI. Of course, it doesn't get us to the 100%, but it gets us to like an 80, 90%. We do the same with training material. That's what we're trying now. Also, we're able to accelerate the due diligence of our third parties by 77% through a partnership with a fintech. We also built model validation as a service. It's an industry trend now here at GBC, in partnership with another fintech. So a lot of really good things. It's just the beginning because we have an ambitious roadmap, but it's really a trust function more than a risk function now. It spans from risk management, the classical traditional topics of capital management, risk, financial risk management. It goes through compliance, where we centralize now the response and we manage the relationship with the regulators, to cybersecurity and security in general, where we protect the value of the shareholders. And then finally, now we're touching into everything related to non-financial risk. So you have operational resilience, third-party risk management, and everything that comes with open banking and fintech, like risks, as we are exploring that space.
Well, you've clearly been super busy during your time, but I wondered, what's been the most challenging risk management situation and how have you overcome it?
I would say two different types of macro risks, if you will. First one being the uncertainty that is introduced by the economic environment. We are in Canada. There was recently a tariff war with our neighbors in the US. I would say that the bank was able to manage it really well, but we did have to really be very careful in the way we do that. There is interest rate risk that is introduced. There is economic risk that is introduced. We have to be careful in our forecasts, and we need to make sure that our message to the shareholder is clear, realistic. So that's the first one, and it's still being managed as we speak. The second element was all the non-financial risks introduced. We're talking about cybersecurity, like AI came with its sophistication, its complexity. So now we have to rewrite the playbook when it comes to cybersecurity, with means that came from the traditional cybersecurity space. Fraud. There is a lot of fraud sophistication, and AI is not helping us. It's actually making it even more difficult to spot patterns because patterns are created every day. And you can't just rely on a library of patterns. You need to essentially start interpreting them in real time. And then finally, resilience. Resilience for me is the art of getting back in the game as fast as possible. The one who gets back faster, the fastest, is the one who wins, in my opinion, in the market. And that's the capabilities that we're trying to develop as much as possible.
Super. That's really interesting. And you've mentioned there, of course, about cybersecurity, the infamous trade war going on between Canada and the US. But out of all of them, what do you think is the most significant risk facing Canadian financial institutions today?
I would say it's really the economic risk, how concentrated we are, how interdependent we are with each other. There is a lot of different big rocks, if you will, and moving them costs a lot of money. And if you make a mistake, it costs even further. So it's very important to stay focused and to stay abreast of all the events and being able to interpret each event in how we are able to react and be able to mitigate that risk fast. Because the mistake that a lot of risk leaders make is that when they see an event, they make the assumption that it's not going to impact them. But with third-party risk management, you will find that you are impacted. You just need to understand how, and you need to get ahead of that and be proactive.
No, excellent. And what lessons do you think the banking sector should learn about risk management from recent global financial disruptions?
I would say that the risk management in Canada is really well done, but I don't think it's the best example of risk taking. Like, I think the banking sector in Canada has been very solid because it doesn't take too many risks in times of crisis. So there is that to learn from it. But I think the Canadian sector also needs to learn how to take risks in peacetime. if you will, to get ahead and augment the productivity and augment a lot of things that we still need here in this economy.
That's really fascinating. And I guess looking forward, you were saying there about maybe trying to take more opportunities, but what risk management trends do you see emerging in the Canadian banking sector, let's say over the next 5 years?
It's really related to the shift to open banking. So again, the usual suspects, third-party risk management, data privacy, the privacy of individuals, the intellectual property of companies, and the ability to provide to customers the transparency on how their data is used and how their data is moved and the control that they have over that. That's the key to open banking. And I think all these emerging risks combined with cybersecurity, with resilience, are going to be the most important ones that we deal with in the next 5 years, because we need to provide a value proposition to the customer, fill a gap. And that's where there needs to be a lot of learning and a lot of experiments and a lot of excellence, if you will.
No, excellent. And for the final question for this first part of our conversation, I was wondering, are there any new developments upcoming at the General Bank of Canada, or for yourself personally, that you can share with us?
Sure, yeah. So we are basically developing a new core banking system, which will allow us to diversify our products, basically bring back the focus on the quality of our data and its power, and grow even further. So the General Bank of Canada is going to be ready very soon to be a strong partner, a reliable partner, and more importantly, a trusted partner for every fintech in Canada.
That's fascinating. We'll be keeping a lookout for that for sure. Well, this takes us into the second part of our conversation. As I mentioned in the introduction, Adam, have you already done the process of being a judge for us before?
Yes, I have been part of the US banking process and the global one last year. So it was a really good experience.
Wonderful. Oh, that's brilliant. That means we've got an expert to talk to here today. And I guess my first question here, because we've been interviewing a few of the different judges that have taken part in the process before. So it's always interesting to see your unique approach when it comes to evaluating submissions. So when you're looking at the different nominations that come through across the different categories, what is your approach when evaluating them?
I look at three things. The first one is the problem that they're trying to solve, the business problem. Like if you are introducing something new, like what is it going to do? Is it going to fill an opportunity or to solve a problem? Usually it's solving the problem. Second thing I look at is the process of thought behind building the solution. Is it technology centric or is it business centric? Are you trying to solve a business problem with a business solution, or are you trying to solve a business problem with just a technology? And it's different. It can work in both ways, but it's usually more sustainable, if you will, when you do it from a business perspective, because technology changes. And then finally, I look at the impact. So here's the deal. A lot of entries are made before an impact is realized or even estimated. So I think it's better to wait a little bit until there is enough impact or enough proof of potential impact before doing an entry. And that's where I see a lot of failure, unfortunately. It's because, yes, you have a good idea, you have a good solution, but then what's the impact? And even the potential impact is not even there. And that's where, as a C-level, as an executive, the board always asks me for impact. So if I am not able to articulate an impact, I won't be able to move forward. And I try to apply the same level of realism to the judging process because I want them to know what's expecting them, if you will.
Yeah, perfect. And I guess you touched on a few themes there, but when you are evaluating these entries, what are the key qualities? If you were to talk to some of the entrants that are about to go in there, so you touched on impact there, but what are the key qualities that make a submission stand out to you?
I would say the first one is the pragmatism. I will explain this a little bit further. So you have the idea of the century, but if you signal in your entry or the description of the idea that it's just the beginning and then it may fail because of those risks, that's a signal for me that you're pragmatic, that you know that it's a good idea, but you also know that it can fail. A lot of entries are overly optimistic. They're like, this idea is the best and it's going to work. So this is the first one. Second one is the simplicity. Again, yes, you can develop a very complex solution, but in an entry, you need to simplify it for the reader because you can't assume that the reader knows as much as you do. Yes, we are selected as experts in the industry, but every expert is an expert in their own area. You can't be an expert in all the sub areas. So there is a simplicity element, and you're going to deal with clients at some point. So you got to be very simple in how you describe it. Otherwise, you lose them very fast. And third, it's the implementation. So if you have a very clear, articulate implementation plan for your solution, that's an indicator of success because you know what to do next. You know what to do. Like if you are given financing, you already know what's going to happen. A lot of ideas, again, they get financing for their idea, but then they struggle to convert it to a real solution because they don't have that execution plan.
No, I think that's some really good suggestions there for the nominees who are thinking of considering this year. So how do the Banking Tech Awards, in your opinion, reflect the current state of innovation in financial services at the moment?
I mean, it's very encouraging. I like to see a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity, if you will. And it's what I call actual creativity, like people try to leverage the current trends to build something that will help the industry move forward. I would only say that there is a balance that needs to be found between buzzwording and leveraging the trends. Blockchain, AI, all those are really strong concepts. If you show that you can very simply understand what's under the hood and use that to solve a very simple problem and a very low-hanging fruit, that's better than trying to boil the ocean, if you will. And sorry, I'm using stereotypes here.
No, it's okay.
A lot of solutions, they try to just implement a trend, while at the end of the day, you need to solve a problem, a business problem.
And finally, I was wondering if you were to speak to a potential nominee who's trying to consider whether or not to apply to the process this year, what would you suggest to them?
To look at their entry with a critical look, an optimistic, positive, but still critical look. Meaning, if they have a problem that they're solving, an opportunity that they're trying to fill, like a void in the market that they see that can bring value to the customers, that they have a solution that is business centric and that they have already an impact or a promise of impact that is quantifiable, then they should go for it. They shouldn't wait. If they don't have one of those three, it's just a matter of articulating. I'm sure it's there. You just need to be able to speak the business language and bridge that with technology, and it's going to work.
I think that's great advice. So if anyone's listening out there and you're wondering whether or not to go for it, Adam says go for it, and I concur. Go for it and apply today. Well, thanks again for obviously taking the time to chat with us. But as we always do on What the FinTech, we finish the episode with our infamous Fintech Jail. So this is where we ask for an industry term or buzzword, and you mentioned about buzzwords earlier, or a trend that you've seen or simply just heard enough of and want to get rid. But you can also save them. We've had a few people save a word from our jail and to get them out. But what would your selection be this week, Adam?
So the ones that I heard enough of and I want to see a little bit more maturity and a little bit more simplicity around is blockchain. I think there is a lot behind that word, a lot of different concepts, sub-concepts that can be more practical and speak more to the user and the banks, if you will, in general. It's like saying technology. What's behind technology? You have cloud, you have AI, you have internet, you have everything. So I would say it's time now to put that to bed or in jail, as you say, and start using more practical sub-terms that can be a little bit more practical. If I can also save a term, it would be the check. I know we have been trying to get rid of checkbooks for a long time, but for me, there's still like a reliable way of transacting. I think they still have like a few years ahead of them before going back to bed, if you will, forever. They work a lot and they are also a good inequality resolver. They reduce inequality between different systems. If they could be a little bit more cross-border, that would be great. But for now, in their current format, I still think they still have a few years ahead of them.
Well, there you go. You've heard it here first. So that's blockchain has entered into the jail, but checks have been saved. But that's it. That brings us to the end of the episode. And I just want to say a huge thank you, Adam, for giving us your time today and all your insights.
Thank you, Cameron, for having me.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you so much to Adam for joining me. As for FinTech Futures, you can find us online at fintechfutures.com and be sure to follow us on LinkedIn to keep up to date on the latest fintech news. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or your favourite podcast service to get notified about all our future episodes. Thanks as well to Arama for editing this podcast. You can check them out at arama.tv. And as always, thank you to everyone for your support, and we'll see you soon for another episode of What the FinTech. But until then, goodbye.